As we come to part 3 of our series on In Tune with the Word, I come to the concept of God as the greatest teacher. You see, being in tune with the Word means you go according to how you have learned. And you learn from who? The real teacher of the Word is God Himself. You see, a good teacher teaches by examples. And those examples, if they can be the natural, you are giving a concept, you are teaching about some concept, and you can afford to get a really live object that can be used, then the concept sinks more into the student than when it is abstract. You know, you're just giving an example of something that is far away. I know many of us are familiar with how Jesus taught, using the natural environment, the physical environment, the social environment. It didn't begin in the New Testament with Jesus. It started with God the Father from the very beginning. I know there are sometimes people who think that the Old Testament is no longer valid, or there are only certain parts of it that are valid. But remember our reading in our first part when we mentioned that all Scripture is inspired. This was in 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 16. All Scripture is inspired. And if it is all, you see, the time Paul was writing to Timothy and talking about this Scripture, the New Testament was not there. So he was actually implying that from Genesis all the way to Malachi in the Old Testament are the Scripture. And he said all of them are inspired. And they are fit for correction, for teaching, for training, and so on and so forth. So in that Old Testament, God Himself set out to teach His people. And what He taught them is what He would want them to follow. And He chose a group to use so that they will also spread out and teach everybody in the world so that everybody will come to the understanding of who God is. I'm actually implying that God, we found Him when He created us in this world. And so good people will want to listen to the person they found in the place they are going. They have come to a new environment. So I want to know who brought this stone here, who built this house here, these trees, who planted them here, how did these animals arrive here, what are they doing there? So human beings, as they were created, and Adam, the first man to be created, who is our parent, he was obliged to listen to God. And indeed, God set out to teach him how to go about things. One of the greatest object lessons, or I will say teaching aids, that God used to teach His people about Himself, His plans for that time and for the future until the close of this earth history and beyond, was what is called the sanctuary. In the Old Testament, which is the very scripture Paul is telling Timothy is inspired, God told the Israelites to construct a sanctuary. The teaching of the sanctuary carries almost, if not all, the idea of salvation history. And so this part of the lesson we are handling today and now about God, the greatest leader that there is, we shall enter into the concept of the sanctuary. The concept is an idea. A concept is an idea. Now, if you are a teacher, there is that thing we call concept. So you want to bring out an idea. So the idea of the sanctuary. What is it? What purpose was it for? What does it mean to us today? Is it still of value? If it is, how? Has its value expired? If it is true, how and why? And has it been replaced? Those are things we're going to learn as we move along. And now, straight away we go to the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verse 8. My Bible here says, God Himself told the Israelites. Remember, He had chosen them as a group of people whom He was going to use to reach out to other people. As we go along with our lesson, we shall come to realize that it is not that they were special in the sense of them being God's people only, but they were only to be sent out to tell the rest. In verse 8 of Exodus 25, it says, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. So there are two things here. The sanctuary and the reason for it, that I may dwell among them. So what is this thing called a sanctuary? In the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, I was looking at this word sanctuary, although it's a word I've known of a long time, but sometimes it's good to get to know better when you want to understand how a word is understood globally or to many people. The word sanctuary refers to many things, but one of them is that it's a place of safety. When you hear of a sanctuary, it means a place of safety. A sanctuary also means a place of protection. The word sanctuary also means a holy or consecrated place where religious services are performed. So, and that's why you can hear some people call their places of worship a sanctuary. It is quite in order because that's a place where religious services are performed. And now, God said, construct for me a sanctuary. He was telling the Israelites when they had left Egypt. So for us to understand this concept of the sanctuary, because it will be taking us through why he said so, and the very long history that sanctuary meant to them and to us today, I would like us to really understand where the sanctuary begins from. Because he says, because I want to dwell among you. Before I go to the sanctuary from the beginning, let me expound a bit on this idea of dwelling among you. In Kenya here, and I think in many other countries, if you are a teacher, and particularly a head of institution, and that institution happens to have students who stay there, we call them boarding students, especially our schools, both primary and secondary. It is advised by the employer that the head of the institution in particular should stay in the school, should be with the students there, so that you can know what goes on even at night, at any one time. It's unfortunate that the rule is not always kept because of a few things here, and one of them could be because there is no place for this person called the head of institution to stay there. Other teachers can stay, it's all right, it is even better, but the teacher number one of that place is required to be there. So God being number one is the first one who came up with this idea. I don't know. It could be that our employers or the government or the people who have planned for education may or may not have known that this is even a godly directive. It is. The idea of staying where your students are, where the people you look after are, it makes your contact with them closer, and they get your points and you listen to them and get their concerns more closely, more frequently, and you help them more. So you can see, God himself said, make me a sanctuary, that's a holy place, that I may dwell with you. If it is there, then I'll be dwelling with you. I want to be with you because I want to help you understand me, understand the direction you should take in life better. That was Exodus chapter 25 verse 8. You stay with your people. God himself did it, started it, and as we shall see along, it helped them to learn a lot more from him. Now, back to a bit of expansion on the sanctuary. The sanctuary being a place where God stays did not begin at this time. This time he's saying that prepare for me a sanctuary. It is the time from when the Israelites are coming from Egypt, headed to Canaan. But now, before that, at the very beginning, we have this sanctuary thing in Eden where Adam was. You see, if sanctuary means a place where God is worshipped, where his presence is felt, where his presence is, then the very first place where Adam and Eve felt God was in Eden. So Eden was a sanctuary. Eden was a place where God himself would frequent, and the first pair of human beings would worship him. And this we can establish. We can establish from Genesis itself. You see, after they sinned, God came to them. And when they hid themselves, this is just to indicate that you could visit Eden and he was with them all the time. In Genesis chapter 3 verse 8, it says, they heard the sound of the Lord walking. That is Adam and Eve. They heard the sound of the Lord walking, meaning they knew how God works. So God will frequent that place. It was a sanctuary. It was a holy place. And so they knew when he comes. And some of the things you could come and do with them, like if we learn some of the direction, when he came there, he told them what to do. Like in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. One of the things he told them, be fruitful and multiply. So he will visit them, tell Adam, be fruitful and multiply. In chapter 2, verse 16 and 17, he gives direction. That is Genesis 2, 16 and 17. He gives direction on what should be eaten. Eat of this tree, eat of that one, eat all other things. But this one here, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, don't. Those are directions. Just like a teacher will stay close to their student and be giving them direction. Do this, don't do that. This one is good for you. This one could not be good for you. So Eden was already a sanctuary. Indeed, God himself put Eden as a place where he could be meeting his people. So this place reminds us of God's presence, something called a sanctuary. That's what people, when you go to church, when you go to a temple, because it can be called anything. It is good to have the sense that it's a place we meet God. Not that God is only in the temple, he's everywhere. But there is a special attachment of the presence of God in such a place called the sanctuary. Now, for this sanctuary, when God is teaching the first pair, he's teaching them what he had already established. I already said, if we accept to be taught by God, because we got created, Adam comes into existence when things have already been created. And when God who created him is existing, it was only good that he listens to God telling him, this is how to go about life. You can imagine you are a new person. You are a stranger in a place. And then you go there and you start dictating how things should happen. You don't even know the route to each place. You are already telling people, let's go here. You know, this is how human beings behave. They have found direction that God has given in his word, but either they don't care about it, or they misuse it, or they misinterpret it. When we do that, it means we don't want to listen to the people who stay in the environment we have gone. And yet it's just natural that you come down and listen and be directed, then you can get to understand, and that will be good for you. So in the teaching of God to his people about the environment in which to live, they came to learn. No, God is a king. God is our creator. God is our teacher. And in his government, just like in any government, there are laws, rules, and regulations. So having been created by God, man was to be taught these laws and was to follow and do as God would have wanted it to be done. So as we come to the next step, we want to see what happens with these laws. If you don't follow them, or if you follow them, just like in any setting, in any institution, what happens? Welcome as we begin the next one.